Good evening. This is Onyx Brightwing coming to you from the Midnight Manuscripts. If you enjoy this channel, please like our channel and remember to subscribe. Today's story is a little bit of a lesson about trusting your town and the people in it. It is called Nothing Forever by Holly Scott. It was strange that no one was out and about that day. If we were witches, Harriet began with a mischievous grin, tearing her gaze from the window and pushing the thought out of her head, I'd brew potions that would make everyone fall in love with me. Anna giggled, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. I'd make the whole town disappear. Poof! Imagine no more school, no more chores, just peace and quiet. Harriet nudged Christine's shoulder. If you were a witch, what would you do? Harriet, who had been laughing along, suddenly went silent. Her smile faded, and she looked at Anna and Harriet with a seriousness that made the other two girls stop giggling. Let us stop now. We shouldn't joke about things like this, Christine said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. Harriet and Anna exchanged puzzled glances. Why not? Harriet asked, still half smiling. Christine's eyes darted to the darkening sky, then back to her friends. Some things are better left unspoken. You never know who is listening. The mood shifted, the earlier laughter now a distant memory. The girls sat in silence, the weight of Christine's words settling over them like a heavy blanket. The wind rustled the leaves, and for the first time that evening, the world outside felt eerily still. And what would they do? Anna asked boldly. It's only a jest. They'd hang you, Christine said, or burn you. Well, they wouldn't burn me, Harriet chimed in with a smirk. They'd all be in love with me. Her parents and brother were spending the holiday weekend in town. They were going to a party at the Monley family's home. Before getting in the cart, her mother asked her one last time, was she sure she didn't want to come? Was she not going to be bored all weekend with only the maid around to keep her company? And she said, of course not. Don't be silly. She'd bring Anna and Christine over for the afternoon and do some gardening. She'd been there several times anyway, remembered what it was like. She had seen the priceless white bear rug, the fish pond, and the seashell-patterned ashtrays. Her brother would run around the yard, screaming with the other children, weaving and ducking around the water fountains and angel statues, begging the gardeners to let them feed the peacocks and cuddle the rabbits. So no, she told her mother again, but thank you very much, and she brushed strands of her hair away from her eyes, smiling sweetly. You're lucky, Molly Was that church affair of hers tomorrow or next week? She said that last part to her husband, who shrugged without looking up, still fiddling with their son's shirt collar while the horse sniffed at his pockets for treats. Well, her mother said, since you're going to be here all weekend, just keep something in mind. She glanced over her shoulder at the hedge, leaves barely rustling in the wind. The sweat stains in the armpits of her pale green dress looked like tiny islands as she began her lecture. If you invite Anna and Christine, make sure they are home before dark. Make sure the chickens are fed and watered, and send Molly into town to pick up some more food for them on Sunday. And if anyone knocks on the door, let Molly manage it. Could you do all that for me? Yes, Mother. After the horse led their cart away, she found her father's beer almost instantly, hidden at the bottom of one of the woven baskets Molly brought back from her village marketplace. She drank one glass under the grapefruit tree by the chicken coop, taking quick little sips, watching carefully for Molly at the window while she waited for Anna and Christine to arrive. Later that night, long after her friends had left her house, she sat on her bed rereading one of the stories she was fond of as a young girl. Rereading children's books was one of her sneaky, most secret treats. Saved for holiday weekends or summer vacations, something that people like Christine or Anna had no need to ever know about. As she read, she needed to raise her eyes to know where Molly was or what she was doing. The sound of her heavy shoes slapping against the floorboards was like a noise made by the house itself. Without looking, she knew when Molly was opening the silverware drawer, lighting the candles to chase away flies, setting the last of the dishes on the table. She was turning pages rapidly, eager to arrive at the climax, when she felt a stubby finger gently tracing her scalp. "We really need to fix your hair, dear," Molly said in that same shrill, high-pitched voice Harriet had been listening to her whole life. "It is bad to have bits of it in your eyes all the time like that." "That won't be necessary," Harriet said, not looking up from the page. When Molly's hands lingered close to her face, Harriet used the book to push them away, ducking irritably from their overwhelming smell of onions and stale powdered milk. She turned a page as the shoe slapped slowly back to the kitchen. During dinner, she dripped a giant spoonful of gravy onto her plate and swirled around the lettuce leaves and onion slices to make it look like she'd eaten something. When she pushed the chair back from the table, Molly was already there, reaching for her plate with one hand and squeezing the flesh on her lower arm with the other. "My lord, you're so thin," Molly said, voice high-pitched and shrill. "Eat more! How are you going to fight off men?" "Could you please not touch me?" Harriet said, jerking her arm away, but the tiny nugget of pleasure that's formed inside her just from learning the word thin was already giving off warmth. Molly said something else, speaking in a low voice that time, and Harry didn't hear it. "Pardon," she said, but Molly had already abruptly turned away, her white apron swirling through the air like a cape. Harry didn't wake up the next day until mid-morning. The day was already uncomfortably hot, and she headed straight for the kitchen, opening the pantry in search of the biscuits her mother liked to eat, the ones with the cream in the middle. As she plopped one in her mouth, there was a loud thud at the door. It echoed through the house, coming in intervals of 3 as though it was a signal she would recognize. "Molly!" Harriet called out, but there was no sound of shoes slapping against the floorboards heading to the front door. The knocking continued. "Oh, Lord," she said. "Molly!" When she was very young, she would stand in the middle of a room and scream Molly's name over and over, not stopping until Molly came running, apron flying out behind her. But that wasn't the kind of silly, immature thing she would do now. She plopped another biscuit into her mouth to settle her nerves, thinking to herself that it must have been one of her mother's friends. It would be just like her mother to send someone to check up on her. As she walked down the hallway, it was hard to decide what felt worse, the damp cloth of the heavy dress sticking to her armpits, or the tug of the bun she pulled too tight, bits of her hair falling into her face. At the front door, she ran her fingertips through her hair, tucking it carefully behind her ears. Sometimes, when she stood in the sunlight, if she tilted her hair just right, she could almost pass for blonde. The first door was made of heavy oak wood with a yellow bolt that slid open easily. She stood behind the second door, the one made of white crisscrossing bars, forming diamond-shaped gaps that revealed the front yard full of crackly bushes and dried-out trees. Standing a few steps away in the front yard was a man. He grinned in a way that made him look slightly embarrassed, rocking on his heels, arms behind his back. There was a lumpy purplish-red scar running down his face, from the bottom of his eye to the top of his lip. "Well, here I am," he said. "Let's go." He was wearing a shapeless brown coat, which hung off him as if empty, too thick for this heat. His feet were bare and caked in red clay, his legs thin. "Sorry I'm late," he said. "It took me a lot longer to get here than I expected. I came as fast as I could." She stared at him, mouth gaping open like a fish out of water. "Lord, I am thirsty," he said, unbothered by her expression. "Does it ever happen to you when you have to walk a long way? I had to walk here all the way from town." He licked his lips. "Never mind. Don't worry about answering now. We'll have time to talk later." "Can I help you?" Harriet said, taking a step back. The man's face suddenly became a mass of deeply ingrained lines. "She did not tell you I was coming." His voice came out high-pitched and sad in a way that sounded deeply familiar to her, like something she had been listening to her whole life, though she could not say why or how. "Father!" she called out over her shoulder, her echo disappearing down the hallway. "There is somebody here to see you." "Princess," he said, the lines in his face growing even deeper. "Come on, don't do that. I know they are not here." She stared at the scar on his face. It was shaped like a fat river leech and shiny. Looking at it made her suck in her breath. She took another step back, tucking her body behind the door so that only her head was poking out. "I just don't understand why she did not tell you about me," he said. "It does not make any sense." "Sir, why you believe you have the right to approach a young lady's home covered in filth and speak to her like this does not make any sense," she said. It created a sudden fluttering in her chest to use a loud voice like that, to be rude without caring. It reminded her of the time she saw her father slap the hands of the street children, reaching for her leftover ice cream on the park picnic table. His mouth turned downwards, an exaggerated sad smile like a clown's. "Well, at least it is a beautiful day for us to run." His head snapped up and he looked directly at her, narrowing his eyes in a way that made her stomach leap at the back of her throat. "Are you ready?" he said. "To run?" "To run from what?" He looked at her as if she said something foolish, like she should have known the answer already. "What is happening in town? Everyone is getting sick." "I do not live in town. I have no reason to run." "Princess, sorry," she said. "I'm sorry. I cannot help you." She closed the door to the point that she was looking at him through the thinnest crack possible, her torso leaning in an L shape. "I'm not your princess." "Listen," he said. "Princess, I'm here to help you." "I'm sorry," she said again, right before closing the door completely, not finding her sentence. "I do not have the key." Molly's room was at the back of the house, next to the stacks of wooden boxes filled with champagne. She forced herself to walk there as calmly and slowly as possible. She placed her hand on the center of the door but didn't knock. "Molly?" she said softly at first, then louder. "Are you there?" She checked the rest of the rooms in the house just to be sure. She checked her parents' bedroom, her brother's, her own. She made sure the back doors were locked and tugged experimentally at the bars over the windows. It was strange. She did not remember ever telling Molly that they were almost out of chicken feed. It was only that evening, when Molly still wasn't back, when she had fed and watered the chickens and the sun had gone down, that she started to get the feeling that something was happening. She spent the rest of the night in her bedroom, curtains shut tight, reading, and after that she just lay there without moving instead of sleeping, knees tucked under her chin, ears tense for the sound of a horse snorting and rickety wheels, keys rattling, the doorknob turning. The next day was Monday, and her parents and brother never arrived home. By mid-afternoon, she headed outside to look out at the road just to check, more in hope than expectation. It was the same as it had been all day. Nothing and no one. It would probably be that way forever. As she stood there by herself, she took a last long, slow look at the neighbor's house in the distance, realizing that she hadn't seen anyone come and go from the property all weekend, or all week for that matter, before trudging back to the house. They most likely weren't home either. Her father's office seemed like a relic from an old world. Harriet was never allowed by her father to go in there, but of course, he wasn't there. None of them were. Still, she felt wrong for disturbing anything in there. Like, even though it was in the house she'd grown up in, it could never be a space she could exist in. The dark wooden desk stared at her, blank and impassive, as the children asking for coins at on the roadsides in town. In the end, she closed the office door, shutting it tight with her hip. It wasn't like there was anything in there useful to her anyways. Most of the room was used to store wooden boxes and crates full of the things her parents wouldn't let her throw away. Her old schoolwork, faded blue and pink tapestries covered in dead moth wings, the wooden dogs and horses she played with as a child, Christmas presents from Molly that she opened politely before stuffing away, brightly patterned dresses and alpaca shawls she'd never dream of wearing, not even alone in her bedroom. If necessary, they'd come back for her. Harriet was certain of it. Her parents, or Christine and Anna. Pale, smiling faces pressing against the white bars of the door, extending their arms as she ran to the kitchen to get the keys out of the wicker basket on top of the fridge. She wouldn't just be left here. She wouldn't be forgotten. Mostly, she wandered through the house, one room to another. The days blended lifelessly together, thick fuzz growing over each one like the dust accumulating on the table and countertops. She spent hours reading her books, lying stomach down on the bed. She read childhood favorites and books about dogs and horses, books about witches and books about illness and disease. She stared at the pages for hours, the worlds blurring until she could be saying, "Princess, princess, princess," over and over again. She never put anything away. She started eating the food her parents reserved for parties, strange things like silvery fish floating in red sauce and olives in slimy black liquid, and left jars of sticky jam licked clean and shiny on the kitchen counters. She rummaged through old school papers, spelling sheets and math work. She ripped open envelopes she never gave to her father to mail across the state, pen pal letters for friends who had moved away, people who left years and years ago. She let them fall to the floor. "Time to get ready," a voice whispered in her head, a vague memory of someone speaking to her, somebody walking away in a playground. Who? When? The moment was just there, barely fluttering on the edges of her mind, and it was easy as anything to chase away, like when she swatted at mosquitoes buzzing at her face. While walking through her parents' bedroom, she kept her eyes strictly averted from her mother's clothes and the open chest drawers, the stacks of books on her father's bedside table. It was best not to worry about where they were, what happened. Do not wonder. Do not go there. Just don't. She headed straight to the bathroom instead, opening her mother's makeup drawer, spilling peach-colored powder all over the sink. But she avoided the framed painting on the wall of the entire family. Her parents, her brother, herself, and Molly. Do not think about it. Don't. 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 Holding this certain dose to her face like a veil. There, still in the scratchy coat, sitting grasped by the bristly hedge, leaning against the grapefruit tree, pacing back and forth, mouth moving as if talking to himself, arms moving exaggeratingly as if mocking any marches, standing still before the tiny crosses on the far left side of the front yard, where she and her brother and Molly had buried generations of pets, cats and dogs, ducks and chickens. If she squinted her eyes, he multiplied into blurry doubles, triples, quadruples. There are dozens of him, an army, pressing their scarred faces against the door, wrapping their sticky fingers around the bars. Every once in a while, a frothy panic would start to file in her stomach, making her hand shake, and when that happened, she dashed to her room and peeked out through the window, holding the curtain dose to her face like a veil. He was always there, still in the scratchy coat, sitting on the grass by the bristly hedge, leaning against the grapefruit tree, pacing back and forth, calling out again and again in a voice muffled by the glass against her ear, "Princess, let me in." Later, she stood outside of Molly's room, hand resting on the door. She looked down at the sandals, waiting for the picture to form in her mind. Molly dressed in her white apron. What else could she be wearing? Carefully unlocking the front door, heading outside. Dawn was breaking. The earliest morning birds were singing. Or maybe it was still dark, the sky speckled with stars. Molly was humming, hands in her pockets. Molly was frowning in her classic sour skull. No matter what Harriet imagined, the picture always abruptly ended the moment Molly rounded the hedge corner, apron swirling through the air, walking busily, purposefully, on her way to what? Towards whom? One day she awakened abruptly to the sound of someone banging on the door, the same insistent sound ringing out again and again. Once again, she just barely opened the door, so that only her face could be seen. He was holding a walking stick, beating the bars like a monk ringing church bells. "Oh," he said, his face framed in the diamond-shaped gap. "You came." His eyes widened in what was unmistakably delight. The whites of his eyeballs were lined with yellow. The scar of his face looked redder and puffier than ever. He was dressed in the same coat, his feet no longer bare. The sight of him made goosebumps break out on her neck. Sour liquid leaked from her toenails. "Be a good girl, princess," he said. "Open the door." "Why are you still here?" "Everyone is getting sick, remember? We have to leave." "It is locked," she says. She was turning away when he pressed his face against the bars and reached out, fingers fluttering urgently towards her. "Princess," he said, "time to go. Could you please not touch me?" The floorboards felt cool and steady under her feet as she backed away. She watched herself head towards the back of the house, to the laundry hamper and boxes of champagne. She was standing in front of the green door, spreading her fingers over its surface before turning the doorknob. The door opened easily. It only took a few seconds to take everything in: the bed with flat pillows, the window with faded curtains, a single black coat, everywhere the strong smell of soap. She opened the closet, but there were only rows of white dresses hanging headless and limbless from hangers, a pile of neatly folded aprons. The black shoes were still there in their usual spot next to the closet. There were thick gobs of candle wax on the windowsill by the altar that hadn't been cleaned up. She sat on the bed. The sharp smell of mothballs made her sinuses itch. She thought, "I've got to figure this out," she thought. "If only I had more time." She didn't know it yet, but there was something waiting. But for now, all she had was her slow rise from the bed. She had this walk towards the refrigerator, the reach for the wicker basket hidden on top, the round ball of the keychain in her hand, and the rattling metal. As she watched the many keys dangle from her fingers, she thought about how there was not a single one that she recognized, not one she could pick out and say with confidence, "This key opens that door. That key opens this one." This home was never really hers, and nothing in it was ever really hers. And the tightly clenched muscles squeezing out blood in her chest had never really been hers either. For now there was only the cool metal in her hand that rattled loudly as she lifted it towards the dirty silver lock. "Oh," he said. The door made a loud scraping sound against the ground as it swung open. "You clever girl." He let out a deep sigh that could have also been a groan of pain. Behind him the hedge rustled and she turned her head sharply. It could have been the flash of a white apron or something else entirely. It felt like noticing the shadow of her own half-closed eyelid. Something had always been there and should have been seen at least 1,000 times before. It was strange that no one was out and about that day. Well, my friends, it seems like the entire town has disappeared from a sickness. I'm really glad that you aren't there to share this fate. If you like this story, please remember to hit like and subscribe to the channel. This is Onyx Brightwing, signing off from the Midnight Manuscripts.